short introduction of themselves. Could we start with our moderator for the day as well, Mr. Chia?
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Teck Yew. I'm the vice chairman for Oliver Wyman, which is a management consulting firm, and we like to say that we have been very involved in the whole climate change agenda, not just in Asia or Singapore, but also globally. So in the COP26 event in Glasgow in 2 weeks' time, we will see ourselves as almost the curator, organizer, the network coordinator for the GFANS, which is actually the Financial Alliance for Net Zero, where we expect a lot of announcements to be made. But turning back locally, if I have the first slide around the infographic from MAS, please. I think you turn back locally to Singapore, right? Singapore sees itself very much as the country that will take advantage of this great movement. It is the one movement that's binding the world, right? So whether you're in the West or in the East, you're hearing the same thing, right? That we do need to make sure that governments, corporates, as well as individuals take climate risk seriously, right? And this will propel a couple of things from a Singapore perspective. For us to be a leading center for green finance in Asia and globally, we need to do 4 things, right? Which MAS has outlined. One is to make sure that our financial sector is resilient from a risk perspective, that our portfolio of clients and their exposure to risk, right? Our investments in assets that are exposed to climate risk, all this have to be taken into account, right? So making sure that our banks, insurance companies, and asset management, investment management companies all are working together to make sure that we know what are the possible scenarios, we stress test it, we measure the risk, we actually use the metrics to drive transition of our portfolio. And that is the fundamental role that MAS is pushing. But in order to do that, there are a couple of things that are also needed, right? We need to develop solutions to do this. It's not something like we want to do it, we can do it tomorrow, right? So we need to make sure that the data taxonomy, right, the ability to capture data, measure data, all these things need to be, right, from a financial services perspective, from a real economy perspective, right? You also need solutions that can do decarbonization, that can capture carbon, right? That capture carbon credits, package them, resell them, whatever it takes to do that transition towards a greener economy. The third leg that came out from this is we need to harness technology, right? Because it's not easy to be able to capture a lot of data, do a lot of things without leveraging the technology behind it. That is why the MAS has requested the Singapore FinTech Association a year back to form a sustainability subcommittee, of which I'm a chair, right? And the whole idea here is how do we leverage FinTech technology, right, in blockchain, in looking at AI, machine learning, and all the data capture capabilities, and actually deploy that into the green finance space. And that's about harnessing technology. The fourth one, which is probably very relevant to today's conference or today's webinar, is the building of knowledge and capabilities. For the whole world to move in tandem towards a new area, a very important new area, we can't do it with the few people that we have, right? If you go to a bank, you go to the FinTech community, you go to literally even the large corporates, you will see that there's only a handful of people who really understand sustainability at an in-depth level. A lot of us would have read about it. A lot of us know the high-level commitments to net zero, right? A lot of us hear about experimentation with impossible foods, right? DNA-based food, right? You look at solar panels, companies like Sunset, making inroads in Asia, in Singapore. But that is actually just at the surface, right? So the opportunity for all of us in the sort of human capital space here, right, is we are now at the ground zero, right? There's a lot of opportunity to build knowledge and build the capabilities and use that to not just participate in the green finance space, but to actually become a leader in it, right? And I think that is what I see, webinars like this being most important. So thank you, Patrick, for inviting us to this webinar. With that, I want to turn to Eric, right? So I will introduce each of the panelists as we go, but maybe we turn to Eric, right? So directly as a bank, right? When you listen to this from an MES perspective, I know that a lot of banks immediately got galvanized into action. There's also a green finance industry task force being set up. Perhaps if I ask Eric, who's head of sustainability for UOB, to share his thoughts on what this means for the bank. Eric?
Thanks so much. Thank you for the introduction, and thanks, Patrick, again for having us here to speak with all of our colleagues. Right. So I want to briefly share, when we think about sustainability from banking, what are some of the lenses we use? Because number one, sustainability, it's a really, really big topic, right? There's environmental science that's embedded within it. There's a social aspect, governments getting into play. And, we know the young generation, they all care about this. But specifically, as we look outside in and then inside out from banking, what does sustainability really mean, right? Now, if we go to the next page real quick, one of the questions I always get asked is there money to be made in sustainability? Or is it we should do good, we should do the right thing, and at the end of the day, it's a bunch of philanthropic, tree hugging, whale saving type efforts? And what I'm going to say to you is it is our very strong conviction in UOB, right, and across the banking sector, that sustainability, number one, has gone mainstream, right? And that means it's not going backwards. And number two, has gone commercial and will increasingly get more commercial. And I think, I'd be happy to elaborate on that a little bit. But if you take a look at this page kind of shows where a lot of investment dollars need to be going into just across ASEAN, for example, over the next 20, 30, 40 years, in order for us to reach our sustainability goals, right? The $1 trillion you see up there is an annual estimated economic opportunity. Now, whether or not it's $1 trillion, half of that or double of that, is not important, right? The fact is that directionality for the investments that need to go in, the directionality for new business models, new economic models, new form of jobs that will come up, that's the directionality that we're looking at. Where are some of these areas where we think the most economic activity will be? First, you can see around sustainable energy and resources. We know today that ASEAN is extremely dependent on fossil fuels for energy generation. And we also know, in order for us to be able to reach our net zero target, both as a country, a region, as well as globally, we've got to be able to figure out new ways of generating energy. Now, whether that's solar, wind, geothermal, or possibly in the future, even nuclear, it is clear that at least for this part of the world, solar works. We've got a lot of sun, a lot of energy can be harvested from it. Solar technology is relatively mature and affordable now, right? So we see one big opportunity around sustainable energy as well as the resource sector. The second big area is around food and agriculture. We're familiar with ASEAN. We grow a lot of, the rice that goes out to the rest of the world. Palm oil is big for us here, huge agriculture based economies. How do we transform our food and agricultural sectors to be able to do what they do, which is feed a lot of people across the world, but in as sustainable a way as possible, while respecting environmental as well as social impacts, right? Big dollars will need to go into transforming that sector. The third one is around industries. We know that there's a lot of manufacturing that goes across ASEAN and all of the logistics that's associated with it. We're shipping raw materials in, we're adding value, we're shipping finished goods out, right? Just around efficient industries. How do we reimagine, reinvest and retool our industries as well as supply chains to be as environmentally responsible as possible. And then finally, we all live in big cities across ASEAN. Green as well as connected cities can allow us to be able to continue to support growing populations, but with the smallest environmental footprint possible. Here, we're talking about green buildings that are very energy efficient. We're talking about even solutions like greening the transportation grid, such that we don't have a whole bunch of cars spewing carbon dioxide, monoxide into the atmosphere, etc., etc. Water, waste treatment, all that kind of stuff. So this is where we see a lot of investment dollars going. And immediately you can step back and look at it and go, this is big business, right? And as we look at the investments that will start at the top, as they continue to flow down into secondary supporting industries, into the jobs that are then required to support all of this, you can see really the commercial case is very strong. If we can move on to the next page, please. So once we as a bank understand the amount of commercial activity that needs to be financed, right, and invested for us to be able to support our countries, communities, as well as customers in forging that sustainable future, how do we do it as a bank, right? So this is an example of what we do across the wholesale bank, which obviously finances corporate customers. Now, we have 4 flagship sustainable finance frameworks that we put out there. And as you go through it, you can see that they're all designed to be fit for purpose for particular sectors and particular industries. The first one, the Real Estate Sustainable Finance Framework, is geared towards financing energy efficient, green buildings, right? That are much more energy efficient in their construct, right? The second one, Smart City Sustainable Finance Framework, takes care of renewable energy, takes care of energy efficiency, takes care of water waste management, as well as green transport. All the things that are going to make our big cities as sustainable as possible as we continue to grow our populations. Third, the Green Circular Economy Framework takes care of the supply chains and manufacturing. How do we build planetary boundaries into how we build our business models, right? And then finally, Green and Sustainable Trade Finance Framework supports the fact that ASEAN is very dependent on the supply chain, shipping in as well as shipping out into various parts of the world. And the Green and Sustainable Finance Framework allows us to be able to support our customers in greening or making sure that the supply chain is as sustainable in a certified manner as possible, so that their buyers in perhaps developed countries with different standards can buy with confidence, knowing that the products they're getting are sustainable or green in nature. So these are, for example, the key finance frameworks that we put out there. What I'd like to do is then show you one more example of how we don't stay just at a framework level, but we try to bring it down to actual real-life solutions that make it as simple as possible for our clients to adopt sustainable solutions. If we may move to the next page. Sorry, if we can move one more down. I think I've already covered this. Yeah. So this is an example of what we call a sustainable finance solution. Now, what's the difference between a framework and a solution? A framework is a bit higher level, right? It tells you what qualifies as green or sustainable type financing. But a solution actually brings together an ecosystem of partners that makes it as easy as possible for our customers to be able to adopt sustainable solutions, right? And so this one we have is called USolar. USolar is targeted at helping customers adopt solar energy, right, as a renewable source of energy. And this is quite a game changer. It's the first integrated solar energy financing platform that we have in Asia. And essentially what it does is we've gone out and curated solar manufacturers, solar panel manufacturers, installers, and brought it together to customers, be they corporate or individual customers, embedded with a financing package that allows a customer the ease of being able to say, do I want to or do I not want to, and can I afford it? Rather than putting the onus on our customers to say, you go find your own manufacturer, you go find your own installer. After you've figured out whether it works with a business model, then come to us and we'll tell you whether we'll finance it. You know, if we were to make it that way, it would be nearly impossible for especially our small and medium enterprise customers or individual customers to be able to adopt solar energy, right? And so this is the kind of thinking that we want to put behind our products and services to be able to support the sustainability agenda and journey. And the reason I wanted to show this program is we've had it running for a couple of years now. And if you direct your attention to the bottom right-hand side, this is something we're very proud of, right? We don't just want to make money. We want to be able to demonstrate that we are creating tangible, positive environmental impact. And through our financing of activities like this, we've been able to generate 210 gigawatt hours of solar energy. And what that has resulted in is the ability to avoid about 113,000 tons of CO2, which is equivalent to planting close to 1.8, 1.9 million tree seedlings and the removal of 25,000 cars off the road. So this is the kind of thinking we want to continue to embed within the bank that keeps us on the straight and narrow, right? We're very cautious about greenwashing. We're very cautious about throwing out big sounding commitments. We want to stay focused on being true to creating positive impact, be it environmentally or socially. So this is, just a bit of the sharing that I wanted to bring forth from UOB that shows, number one, how environmentalism as well as sustainability is embedding it into banking, where we see the opportunities, how we're responding to it. And I hope that provides good context as we move on later to talking about careers and job opportunities within the industry. Thank you very much, Tekiu.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, so I think that was a brilliant description of things that are practical that can be actually brought to life very quickly, right? And good to hear that UOB has been doing this for a couple of years, and it's not just a fad that everybody jump on, right? But I also want to turn to Punit now, right? I think one of the things that are clearly challenging us is the rate of adoption by SMEs, right? Where they can see clear solutions like solar. Many of them have jumped on that. But to actually see solutions across the SME organization takes a lot more work, right? And I think this is where fintechs, represented by experts like Punit, will actually talk about how we are thinking about helping SMEs really navigate this journey from almost a ESG 101 perspective, right? It's a bit of education and there's a bit of enablement. So with that, Punit, over to you. You're mute.
Okay, here we go. So very good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for your time. Tekiu, thank you for that very kind introduction. I'm reminded of a debate between an SME and a very large company, and the large company turned around to the SME and said, you guys are small, you don't understand. And the SME said, look, every big company started as an SME at one point in time. So I think this is the starting journey of our life. I think this is a very timely discussion because sustainability is now becoming front and center of all the debates around the world across all stakeholders. And more importantly, this is now influencing how companies are building their workforce. And I think that's particularly relevant for the conversation we are having today. So I think Eric shared a wonderful example of how an organization like UOB is looking at sustainability and supporting it. Let me now give you an example of how using sustainability, we can solve problems, not just within the sphere, but outside or in collateral areas. So I advise two companies, Rootant, which many of you are familiar as a supply chain platform in the fintech space, and Global Initiatives, where I'm also part of the promoter group. We're a sustainability and data science company. Now, Rootant and Global Initiatives have come together to really help SMEs access green finance. In fact, this is a proposal that's also going to be featuring in the Singapore FinTech Festival next month. So let's look at some of the problems we're facing and see how we can solve them. Next slide, please. So we have a situation in ASEAN where there's a huge ask for investment in sustainability. banks are very keen to invest in sustainability, but frankly, they're not finding enough borrowers for green financing. So credit demand for green finance has to grow significantly for banks to meet the commitments that they've made to lend to such firms. On the other hand, we've got a very large unmet need when it comes to SMEs, because they're finding it very difficult to access supply chain financing, nearly $2.5 trillion globally, which is growing at between 15 and 20% per annum. And this is particularly relevant for us in Southeast Asia. Next, please. So we think greening SMEs is probably the solution that can address both problems. We need to have an SME dedicated framework, which doesn't rely on publicly available information, so that we can overcome the SME hesitation that sometimes comes through. And we also need a single platform that can manage SME data, sustainability data, and financing on scale. So to address this problem, these are the two challenges that we need to overcome. So let's see how we're actually working to address this problem. Next, please. So Rutant and global initiatives.
Yeah, hello.
Sorry, I think I've got some guests who've just left. So coming back to the presentation, we were talking about Banco. Banco is the platform, the common platform that we're using along with Rutant. Now, this is a platform that is designed to do exactly that, which is to encourage SMEs to go green. So what it does is it builds an ecosystem around the supply chain. It starts by digitizing the supply chain commerce between the large buyer and the small seller, which tends to be an SME. And it creates irrevocable payment undertakings from the large corporates or buyers in favor of the small suppliers. Now, this payment undertaking actually serves as a credit assurance, not just to the supply chain, but also to bankers who might want to finance this transaction. The suppliers on the platform can also be invited to complete a sustainability assessment that has been constructed specifically by global initiatives. Now, this assessment is designed for smaller companies. And unlike other frameworks which talk about absolute targets, this actually is based on peer comparison within each sector. And that's important to note, because what we really try and do is identify who are the best performing SMEs or players in every sector. And we compare the other respondents to that score. So what each respondent receives is an index. We call it the Singapore Sustainability Index, along with a gap analysis, which tells them how they might be able to improve. Now, because we use peer comparisons, the output is realistic, because this is practice that has already been implemented by somebody else. And the respondents find it very attractive because it helps them improve their competitiveness within their sector. So it's not just about sustainability, but also making sure that they have a very robust and competitive business proposition. Now, the banks can join the platform. They can use the payment undertaking that I spoke about earlier and the sustainability score that we generate together to offer green finance on the platform itself. So it's a self-contained platform that can address all requirements for all stakeholders. But perhaps most importantly, the sustainability assessment that we are doing can also be aggregated to throw up trends which can help regulators, trade bodies, large companies, and banks to incentivize behavior, and more importantly, to drive shared solutions. So if you recall, Eric's presentation had USolar as an example, and that would be a really good sort of indication of how a shared solution can work. Next, please. Now, why is our solution, or why is this program different from the others, and why is it that it is likely to succeed when perhaps some of the others have found it a little more difficult? I think there are a couple of factors that make it unique. The first is that it combines a number of different disciplines on one platform. So it's important to recognize that sustainability has to work in harmony with other technologies if you really want widespread adoption. It can also be customized. So again, going back to Eric's presentation, he talked about one of the pillars of UOB under trade financing, where they looked at traceability as a source for providing green finance. So this program can actually be modified to monitor traceability by SMEs, so we can use APIs to connect with certifying agencies, and we can monitor the information relating to every respondent on an ongoing basis. And perhaps most importantly, what it does is that this program helps SMEs improve their resilience and international competitiveness, because they have a very good understanding of where they stand within their sector, what are the gaps between their operating environment and perhaps some of the best in their peer set. The next, please. So in a nutshell, if I was to sort of describe the benefits of this program, this would be a common standard of sustainability. Some of you might be familiar with the FICO score in the US, which is used for consumer credit evaluation. Or in Singapore, we have the interoperable Pay Now service. Now, much like that, this sustainability standard that we are defining can be used by all sectors within the economy and also across multiple geographies. We also think that this will cement Singapore's position as a sustainability hub and drive not just skill development, but also investment, which is very much the ambition of the Green Finance Plan. And finally, we're talking about impacting a very large number of respondents or players. There are 2.5 million SMEs in Southeast Asia alone who are looking for green finance. There are about 71 million SMEs in Southeast Asia overall. Even if we assume that these 2.5 million SMEs employ 10 people, we're talking about 23 million individuals, which is nearly 5 times the population of Singapore. And the solution can very easily be exported beyond ASEAN without too much additional investment. So it is you build it once and you roll it out for a number of markets. So as you can see, using a sustainability-oriented solution, we've been able to solve a problem that cuts across many sectors. And I think this trend will continue. And frankly, it should really augur well for all of you who are considering a career in this area. So with that, let me hand it back to TechU and see if there is anything that you might want me to clarify.
Thank you, Puneet. So maybe I turn to Patrick, right? So Patrick, you've given the broad introduction on this area. Now you've heard, from Eric and Puneet, and the growth agendas obviously here, right? So what would you advise your union members, your colleagues in this space, right, in navigating this, right, in moving towards this? I mean, have you been hearing concerns or sort of from them about this space, or how would you like to share that?
Yeah, hey, thanks to you, and really thanks to Puneet and Eric for giving us the background and what's in and what's happening in this space. Actually, and I said in my opening, I'm quite bullish about this space. As you know, this ESG agenda is big, not just in Singapore, in ASEAN, in Asia, but also globally. Traditionally more in the western part of the world, but now ever increasing emphasis by companies, businesses, and governments too, in Asia, in particular Singapore. As you know, the first manifestation of it is in our Green Plan and our and this big 2030 objective. And of course, the very, very first semblance of green finance, in a way, it's through the issue of green bonds this year during budget 2021. So I think that's a big first sign of how the government is embracing this. And of course, a series of announcements along the way, including as recent as last month in September, where there was Ecosperity 2021, when DPA Heng Swee Keat really dive into the various areas. And myself also, in another hat of mine, wearing on the EDB board, I think there's a lot of investments and a lot of strategic investments, not just by Temasek and the government-linked companies, but also in this space of ESG. We are attracting investments, and you can see, it's not an easy journey. And yes, solar is one big thing that many of us is synonymous to many of us, and we are also, some of us are buying devices of e-commerce platforms to really tap on solar. But I think this is just but the tip of the iceberg. I think green and sustainability is beyond just solar energy. As you can see, the amount of strategic initiatives and investments we are trying to bring in, and the focus areas, for example, urban mobility, very, very big thing. We've been looking at that. I think Eric earlier alluded to his nice infographic and chart on some of the key areas. As you know, urban mobility is something very, very sacred and important, particularly in Singapore. And in this big drive towards EV, and we just heard COE prices shot over the roof because everyone was trying to buy a Tesla. Yeah, and I mean that's one area, and the other one, food sustainability and food security. Eric earlier alluded to. I think many countries, not just in Singapore, particularly countries with a very, very strong agriculture sector, yeah, are really looking at how that this will impact them, and how nature in a way will work, and how can we consume less and do more. I think these are very, very important agendas. Urban mobility, food security, food sustainability, and as well as you can see, with the green bonds that were announced in Budget 2021, is actually to finance many of the infrastructural projects across varied spaces, various sectors, various industries. And the list goes on, but I just wanted to paint a picture of some of the key strategic investments that we're trying to bring in, at the same time also focus on in the next 3 to 5 years. And as I share about this industries, that's where it also ties in very closely with new companies, businesses, and opportunities. And that's why we have today's session, to excite everyone, and hearing from Punit and of course Teck Yew and Eric. We know the banks, the fintech companies, and I think beyond fintechs and banks, various sectors and industries are starting to look at this. So I think I see opportunities. In particular, of course, today's session is focused on the banking and financial sector. We're looking at possible growth opportunities in jobs that require knowledge of this space. Need not be ESG experts. We have only few and far between, so we are trying to. I know many of the organizations are trying to put people with ESG expertise, but I think it's a good starting point to have knowledge in this space. I think a working knowledge is important. Of course, some with more deeper competencies. You have people who do audits, ESG audits, people who operate the space to ensure companies and businesses meet the criteria, meet the net zero targets, etc., and the various scorecards for the sustainability space by various organizations and businesses. So if I may say, in whatever competencies that you may have, I think it's good. In whatever sector you may have, particularly if you're in the financial sector, it is good to procure, or should I say, pick up knowledge in this space. Some may, depending on how involved you are in this space, some may say this sector is still quite in the nascent stage, but actually, if you deep dive further, it's been around for a while, and it's just that there's greater attention globally with the upcoming session in Glasgow. At the same time, also locally, and with more, mostly the younger generation, very, very passionate about this space. And therefore, I see a lot of opportunities for jobs growth in this space across sectors and industries, not just in the financial sector, not just in the banking sector, not just in the fintech space, but definitely something where you can, I would say, in a way, interoperability with deep competencies in your particular field or space, coupled with this knowledge, will put you in good stead. So therefore, I think the tripartite partners, including IBF, as well as the various agencies, are including our institutes of higher learning. I'm made aware that some of our IHLs have started courses, certifiable programs, mostly funded by Skills Future Singapore, for you to pick up knowledge in this space. So feel free to Google it. We're trying to, in the last run up to this, we are trying to get more information. I know some of our IHLs, including our universities, have started programs in this space. So I think I look forward to them, and I urge everyone to join many of these other webinars to give you a kind of like a flavor of it. At the same time, also a primer on it. But if you want to go deeper in it, please do and take the bold step to pick up all this new knowledge.
Thank you, Patrick. Maybe I turn back to Eric. Eric, you shared a lot about solutions from the bank to your clients, right? Which obviously is, the bank has a big influence on how capital can be mobilized to help clients. But what about ESG on the bank's perspective? That means, as a bank, how have your organizationally changed, right? Have you all moved people in a certain space, increased the headcount in certain areas, or even what are your ESG practices that are now embedded in the culture of the bank?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot for that question. And I think that question is actually critically important because we know at the end of the day, organizations are made up of humans, and how humans organize themselves create the activities, right? And so I would say the first biggest sign, right, from an organization or human perspective, right, that is critical was the very fact that all the way from the board to CEO to the senior management level, that there was an alignment and understanding on the criticality of sustainability. And not so much because it was a fashionable thing that was happening, but because it was a mega trend that is going to find its way integrated to every part of society, business, employee retention, market value, valuations, right? And so they were able to understand the criticality of sustainability across the entire strategy and effectiveness of what the bank does in its very beating heart. And then from there to be able to say, what are we going to do about it, right? So obviously a very big signal they did was saying we need a chief sustainability officer to be able to organize ourselves across the entire group, across business functions, across geographies, across customer segments, etc., to make sure that we are doing this as coherently as possible. Now, that number one, I'm sharing already because these are new roles that we will begin to see come up more and more. The corporate function of sustainability, not just the health safety expert, not just the risk management folks, not just the sustainable bankers, but really the corporate function for sustainability, right? First. The second key message was they chose a business executive to be CSO. And this is also quite a strong signal, right? Because essentially what board and CEO had realized was if we're going to make this work, it cannot be a side conversation. It cannot be philanthropic in nature. It cannot be a marketing or branding conversation. It has to be at the very beating heart of how we run business itself. And what better way to make sure that we do purpose and profit right than to grab the finance guy, because I'm a finance guy, and make him deliver to the sustainability agenda. So I will ensure we utilize capital as effectively as possible for building a sustainable business model with our clients for our economic communities, right? And so that balance of understanding how to embed it without giving away your balance sheet, but making sure you're still making very good, smart commercial decisions is, I think, another trend we're going to see as businesses start to integrate this more and more into their business models, right? The third thing that we did internally is we created a governance model that ensures everybody is part of that journey. And so we have a group sustainability committee that is chaired by myself, but all of our members are senior managing directors from the key functions across wholesale bank, retail bank, asset management, risk, HR, property, etc., etc. And in this way, we hold each other tightly in a unified, integrated way as we forge the river of sustainability, making sure nobody gets left behind and all of us, as an integrated whole, make it safely over to the other side, right? And so, I think that just so many human, organizational capability lessons that can be learned from the sustainability journey. It's just too rich for me to even bring out. But you just give you a bit of sense on how great a question that was. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, but I think, Eric, your bank has also sort of permeated it down to the operating level, right? So even your relationship managers, your frontline have been trained in this space. And I think that the idea here is that regardless of whether you're in a bank or once you join a bank, the learning in this space is evolving, right? It's continuous, right? And there's a lot of opportunity to really absorb the knowledge as we grow this business. But perhaps moving to Punit, right? I think this is one area where the war for talent is tremendous, right? In a typical fintech versus bank world. A lot of people will gravitate towards the fintech because it's agile, it's sexy, it's fast moving. But in the sustainability space, I would think that the challenge now is that everybody, bank, fintechs, big tech, government, consultancies like us, we are all looking for people in this space. So how have you as a fintech, in your own right, SME, right, business, been able to really attract the right people, and what do you look for?
Yeah, so I think let me start with the last question. What do we look for? We look for a passion towards sustainability because this is an evolving field. It's not something that is very well defined. So a trained individual is never going to be, or a formal training is never going to be enough. You have to continuously keep yourself abreast of developments and regulations as they're evolving around the world. So you really need to have that passion for the field. Now, my experience has actually been quite mixed in the last couple of years that we've recruited a number of people and also engaged with a number of large organizations. So yes, there is a dearth of specialized talent, absolutely. There are not as many people who are well-versed in or formally trained in sustainability as in technology or other disciplines. So you have to look long and hard to see how you can attract people. I think the good news is there's a large number of people who are willing to leave comfortable large corporate jobs and move to more agile small setups. I think there was a time when, particularly when I started sort of my career, if I had told people that I was joining a small setup, people would certainly have looked at me in a very quizzical manner. But now that isn't the case. So there's a number of people from large companies who want to join the small firms. But also another trend that has been very encouraging is that there are a number of people who have formerly been trained in management or in other disciplines who've now made the switch to sustainability on their own. And some of them have actually taken a drop in their remuneration. Some of them have actually switched organizations and have just joined a sustainability consulting firm to gain the experience. And they've learned on the job. And I think that for me is a really fascinating trend because I think sustainability as a standalone subject is probably going to be a short-term flavor. I think we all know that it has to embed itself with other technologies and other businesses for it to be really successful and impactful. So a cross-disciplinary discipline sort of training or appreciation is always going to be very useful. And what we find, particularly in the firm that I'm working in, we find people who've come from other disciplines and have adopted sustainability have a much, much better holistic perspective. So I guess my message to all the young people who are listening to this broadcast, if you are passionate about sustainability, it should matter not that you have not been formally trained in it. There's a real opportunity for you to make the switch. And if you make the switch, you will not be at a disadvantage. You'll actually have the advantage of having exposure to multiple disciplines, which is the need of the hour.
Thank you for that. It's an interesting point. So we have got questions coming up on the chat site where, questions around, how do we learn more about the sector, apply knowledge, how do we get into this space, right? So I think some of these answers that provided would address that. But I think maybe even sharing my own experience, right? For this year, when we opened up Oliver Wyman internships, we brought in 20 interns. 10 of the interns were dedicated to sustainability, right? And they all came from universities where they were sustainability minors, right? So SMU, ASEAN, NTU, and US. So we were literally working with the 3 universities to pick their top students in sustainability and brought them in to work with us on projects, one of which was actually for the Global FinTech Accelerator. So we were using a whole bunch of interns and exposing them to some of the global fintechs that are actually doing a lot of work in the green fintech space. So internships might be one way that people think about getting that knowledge. The second thing that I thought was interesting in that is also that when we actually look at the CVs of people who wants to be in sustainability, we find that there are a lot of people who are passionate and they actually have evidence of their passion. rather than just saying they're passionate, right? A lot of them volunteer to, for NGOs that remove plastic, right? NGOs that look at food safety, food wastage and other things. So there are so many of these organizations in Singapore that you can volunteer for and start working inside, right? And I think that lends credence to, whatever statement you make about your own passion in this space. So I think that's just my personal observation, right? But I think on a broader note, right, I think when we look at Green Plan 2030 as a country, we acknowledge that Singapore as a little red dot will never be able to contribute to the global removal of carbon, right, by ourselves. So the ambition by MAS and by the government is that we need to be a hub. We need to be a financial hub for Southeast Asia, for the region, for the world, in order to be able to deploy solutions and funding to the larger but less developed countries, right, where such help is needed. So maybe, Eric, back to you as a regional bank, right? Where would you see, the bank's ambition and initiatives, right, beyond the Singapore frameworks?
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. Before I go into the response on UOB, I think you picked out a very interesting point, which is, MAS in Singapore trying to position Singapore as a green finance hub. And while you rightly kind of put it altruistically from the standpoint of doing our part towards achieving a net zero future, there is also a hardcore, relevance of Singapore, the survival of our country, tapping into a mega trend for our populace, to be able to generate the right jobs as well. And I think that, I want to briefly touch on that because something Puneet said really kind of struck a chord with me, right? Is there two ways to think about participating in sustainability as a career, right? There is, number one, putting sustainability as the core and then building capabilities around that. That means you will be, for most of your life, trying to become a full-fledged sustainability professional, right? And that's very valid, right? We see many of those roles coming up, very important. Alternatively, you can pursue a career, right, in a different function, but have a lot of sensitivity to building sustainable lenses, considerations, capabilities, the language, the tools, right, the mindset, right? And that is very, very important as well, because in the sustainability journey, whether in a bank or anywhere else, we're going to need all of the skill sets to be integrated in. So it's important to make that distinction first. It can be sustainability as core with broader skills, or a functional skill with sustainability embedded in. Yeah. So as we shift now over to the broader conversation outside of just Singapore alone, now it is not an uncommon known fact that Singaporean banks don't actually bank Singapore. We bank Singapore, but we don't bank Singapore only. A big part of our revenue profile comes from the fact that we bank economies outside of Singapore. And number two, a lot of economic activity run through Singapore. And even though we bank it in Singapore, it is run through type activity, right? And so once we understand the criticality, right, of financial services to Singapore and the criticality of sustainable and green financing to banking, you begin to see that you need to be able to activate and unlock, right, sustainability as a financing capability, not only in Singapore, but really as an activator across the entire network, right? Now, we have a very natural advantage in Singapore. Whatever has made banking already so successful in Singapore will make green banking equally successful in Singapore. Good standards, good talent, right? We've got all the flows, et cetera, right? And so Singapore banking absolutely has a critical role to play. Now, how can we play this role? First, a lot of the standards that we need to be building such that we can roll out sustainable finance throughout the network in a coherent manner can be built and up to a high level of standard here in Singapore. And that's what we try to do in UOB, right? The sustainable finance frameworks we build up, the solutions that we build up, these are not country specific, right? These are meant to be applied globally with local flavors, right? That's one thing we definitely do. The second thing is building up the core central teams of capability, be it at a corporate level, be it for risk management, TCFD, sustainable finance, or even property. We build up a lot of that core capability in Singapore, but in service of a lot of our subsidiaries, right? As well as customers outside of Singapore as well, right? A third thing that we can really start to play, and this is where Singapore typically punches above our weight, is as a thought leader, be it from an influence perspective, education, or whatever it may be. It is quite surprising to me that as a Singaporean bank, our resources are frequently invited to speak to regulators in other jurisdictions, even as they go on their learning journeys and all that kind of stuff, right? And so that's another way that I think Singapore will contribute very meaningfully towards the regional growth. And the region does need a lot of help, because if you look at all of us, Singapore included, and where we are on the net zero goals or our nationally determined contributions, none of the ASEAN countries have been able to articulate a net zero path by 2050. So there is a lot of education, a lot of collective courage and conviction, a lot of capability building that needs to go. And Singapore is absolutely well placed to be able to position ourselves there.
If I may add, I just saw a whole string of questions, particularly for Edwin, on skills, training, how we are looking at getting fresh entrants in this space. Just to share, and there are two levels, one at the NTUC labor movement level, the other one at the Banking and Financial Services Union level. At the NTUC level, we've actually started work on this. So through our Employability and Employability Institute, we have actually started working with quite a number of companies, particularly in the solar and alternative energy spaces, to look at because they are really in demand. Yeah, they're in demand for engineers, AI experts, tech people, as well as really supply chain, as well as even technicians. So we are working with them to recruit and hire more of these. I think there's a very, very strong demand for expertise in this space on the ground. That's the starting point at the NTUC level. But at the BFSU level, for a start, we are trying to work with many of the companies and looking at where the job opportunities are, scanning the environment. So we are in close contact with the Institute of Banking and Financial Service, Institute of Banking and Finance Careers Connect, which is a one-stop, well, I wouldn't say not just a portal, but a physical space where we are working together behind the scenes, Workforce Singapore, NTUC, BFSU, working very, very closely, including with ABS, as well as the various associations in the financial sector space, namely banking, insurance, and asset management. So we're actually working closely behind the scenes for a start, sussing out where the opportunities, and I think many of the FIs are still, of course, looking at this space and where shall we expand, where shall we hire in a very cautious way as well. That's the sensing on the ground because of the uneven and uncertain outlook. But definitely, our sense is that on the ground that we are, particularly the FIs are particularly bullish in this space, and therefore setting up big units such as the one Eric is heading. And of course, as you know, as Eric mentioned earlier, you need domain expertise for a start in your whichever sector or space you're in. That's like him, very, 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 au fait in the banking and finance space. But now thrown into the deep end of trying to ensure sustainability in UOB. And I think that will be the likes of many of the FIs in demand, people who are in this space or in adjacent spaces with competencies, primary competencies, deep competencies in the specific domain, and then pick up the relevant skills. My colleague Kang Shen has attempted to put some of the links to some of the programs across our institutes of higher learning so that you can pick up some knowledge on this space. At the same time, upcoming, I believe it's the next 2 weeks, we have the Singapore FinTech Festival where besides fintech, besides digitalization, and of course updates to the financial and fintech sector, is a big focus on climate change, sustainable financing, and green finance. So if you want to pick up more knowledge for members, we managed to broker some discounts for you to attend the program, including the Web 3.0 certification as part of the entire Singapore FinTech Festival outreach. So do tap on that, and that will be a good starting point for you to pick up some working knowledge across the financial sector space, in particular in the fintech and sustainable financing.
Thank you, Patrick. I think it's important. I think this sustainability area is one where I see two things, right? One is the ecosystem. Banks, but you also next helping banks, right? In terms of providing data solutions and other things. And then you've got consultants like us, right? So it is actually a very big ecosystem. And that's one area where maybe your members also look at, right, beyond the pure banking space. The other one that I thought is interesting is in hearing a lot of things that Eric and Puneet have been talking about. I get a sense that there is a new area of competency that needs to be brought in, right? And that's really your ability to collaborate, right? Because it's all about collaboration. It's not about, I said, here is a green loan, come and get it if you want it, right? It's really creating the collaborative ecosystem that brings a integrated solution to a client, right? Or grow a client. So again, these are the skills that I think will be inherently needed in this Web 3.0 or this new economy, right? But maybe turning back to Puneet now, right? From your perspective, right? Again, seeing Singapore from a sort of a starting point to become a regional hub, what are the challenges you would face as an SME, right? To actually access, the SME network across ASEAN, for example, right? Your millions of SMEs out here that could need help in navigating this journey.
Yeah, so I think there are two parts to this. So first of all, the solution that we're putting together is actually meant for large companies who will have suppliers across Southeast Asia. So what we're really trying to do is establish one framework or one standard or one benchmark, which is invented in Singapore. We are hoping to call it or brand it as a Singaporean index, because Singapore certainly has an aura of quality and a perception of very strong quality in the region. So anything that comes out of Singapore is held in very high esteem. So companies who are based here will have their network of suppliers across, well, not just Southeast Asia, but globally. And they will use the framework and it's scalable across boundaries. The other thing that we're seeing is that Singapore, all said and done, is a small market. So the SMEs that we have in country are also very outward looking. So they're also looking to expand beyond the shores of Singapore because they find it attractive. And with the use of technology today, it's easy to access other markets. There was a time when barriers of entry were very high because information flow was asymmetric. That is no longer the case. So a number of SMEs are actually now looking to see if they can use sustainability as a competitive advantage. It started as a hygiene factor. People wanted to look at companies who were sustainability minded to sort of, be comfortable that they were dealing with the right people. But now, if you talk about taking sustainability to the next level up, it becomes a competitive advantage because it also leads to being future ready and also leads to being more efficient and more connected across all aspects of business. Because again, I want to stress, sustainability is not just about climate. It is a very important part, but it's also about engaging with communities, being fair to your employees, having gender diversity. I mean, it's a whole ecosystem. So if you're really practicing sustainability, you're being a good corporate citizen, and you're just becoming more competitive. So there is that, and also you talked about collaboration. There are other companies that are actually coming together to meet the need of SMEs when it comes to carrying their credibility across borders. So they are independently verifying some of the information that the SMEs share with their vendors, and creating digital wallets or digital suitcases, if you will, of information or verified information. So a lot of this is actually making Singaporean SMEs go cross-border, just using sustainability as a competitive advantage.
Before I go to another point, but there's a question that was asked to Eric, I guess. What is the difference, tangible difference between a green loan versus a non-green loan, right? For your customers, is it in rates or packaging or whatever it might be? How would you define it?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Frequently, I'm asked, right, in a different way that says, if I take a green loan, will I get better pricing, right? That's generally how folks express that question to me. And I want to tap on something Puneet mentioned, right? Which is, if we're thinking about green or sustainability in a way of small advantages, I think we're missing the whole conversation here, right? Whether or not you get 5, 10, 15 basis points of price advantage versus a conventional loan, yay, wonderful, right? That is actually a function of market pricing. And what's happening with market pricing is banks are recognizing that green loans and sustainable loans, right, are something they want to build more of in their portfolio. So there's more demand for this kind of assets. On the economic activity side with our customers, because there is more demand from us than supply from them yet, that's why, as a function of market pricing, the interest rates for green or sustainable financing is lower, right? It is not because a bank is altruistically going out there saying, let me throw away pricing in order to build a sustainable finance portfolio. Now, we could if we wanted to, but I would argue that that is actually not a sustainable way of building a sustainable finance portfolio. So we have to be true to first principles, right? You want to bank the sustainable assets that make sense, and you will let market find its natural pricing through price discovery, okay? Now, then I will turn that conversation around to either an individual or to a SME or to a large corp to say, why are you going on a sustainability journey? Do you understand beyond a reaction of, oh, I got to do something that looks sustainable, how sustainability embeds and integrates into your business model itself? And this is where something Puneet said really resonates with me. Sustainable business as a concept is beyond environmental. It is everything about how you run your business. And is it viable in a sustainable, responsible way over the long run, right? And part of it might be environmentalism. Part of it might be huge social impacts, right? And so if we start with the right North Star, which is what is the environmental social impact that we as an individual, as a small company, or even as a large company are trying to achieve, then let everything fall out from there. And if it doesn't make sense because the technology isn't mature yet in your particular industry, then the hard reality is some of these technologies still need to come. And that's where, folks like Puneet, right, with the new capabilities, new technologies, new money are supposed to create some of these new technologies for us. But where those technologies already exist, just be really considered in the next time, for example, as an individual, you buy a car. Do you really want to buy a combustion engine car, knowing that in 10 years' time, right, all of your friends are going to be railing on you for being a boomer? Or is this the right time to look at an electric vehicle and say, yeah, okay, maybe there's a bit of short-term pain with charging stations, but I can see that the country is going to get there in the next 12, 24 months. Maybe I should be making this investment decision. Applies for small companies, applies for big companies, right? So that's kind of how I think we should be thinking about it.
Yeah. We've all joined the queue for the EV cars. It's a long waiting list, apparently. So yeah, I think we are coming to the close of this. I think there are no more questions from the chat. But I think it would be good if we could sort of turn around to each of the speakers and sort of give your concluding comments on this, encouragement, whatever it might take to also galvanize the people, all right, in the call to actually get into this space as well. Perhaps we start with Patrick.
Yeah, thanks to all of you. I picked up some tips and pointers too, hearing from all of you, although being part of the panel. But I think more importantly, my main takeaway, and of course, I hope all of you who are tuning in and to this webinar, thanks for joining us. And really, the main takeaway is that I think there are opportunities available in this space, particularly not just in the financial and the banking and financial services sector, but also beyond this banking and financial services sector. And like I said, we are looking forward to working with many of the employers. In fact, we have started on this journey quite a while back already. We started working very, very closely in the fintech space with the likes of the Singapore Fintech Association. TechU is very familiar with that, and we have been, and of course now with Blockchain Association Singapore, and we have started training programs to acquaint people quite a number of years back already. In this, when it first started out, and being in part of Singapore Fintech Festival in the last 5 years. I think these are things that we are doing, and I think the green space and the green finance space will be something, the next big thing, and it marries together many other sectors, many others in the partners and stakeholders in the entire ecosystem, beyond just the financial sector and really the green space. So I think it augurs well for us to continue to work together. You trust and rest assured that we will be organizing more of these sessions to bring all of you up to speed. Like I said, the next big feature which we are also in part of and supporting, and well, in a way also speaking at, will be the FinTech Festival that's upcoming. So do be part of that. Now that it's virtual, you can access it anytime, anywhere, and at your convenience. And more importantly, I think we are really looking out for more jobs in this sector. So some of the employers or companies that are tuned in, or HR, or as well as those in this sustainability space who are tuned in, you have job opportunities, do drop us a note, drop us an email, drop us a message, so that we can better connect with you, together with our friends, our tripartite partners in the Institute of Banking and Finance, Careers Connect, as well as all our other placement agencies.
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, I think to your point, the Singapore Fintech Association has also been working with the polytechnic level. So we ran a Poly Fintech 100 program. We had competition in this green finance space as well with them. So I think the movement is very good. I mean, I tend to Punit, right? Punit, you've been in this space for a long time, both emotionally and now deep inside technically. So perhaps some closing remarks from you.
Sure. So what I would say is that it is fascinating how deeply embedded this conversation has become in almost all walks of life. Every time you have an issue, even the vaccine issue, for example, the world gets polarized. There are vaxxers and there are anti-vaxxers. But I can't imagine there being any anti-sustainability sort of activists. There are very few, if any at all. I mean, I can only think of one who's probably playing golf somewhere. So I guess that leaves me with a huge sense of comfort that this is a shared responsibility. People recognize that this is an area where we need to do more, and everybody's kind of stepping up to walk the extra mile. The other trend I think which has helped is that we're living in a far more transparent world. We're data-driven, we're technology-driven, so companies don't have a place to hide. And social media has become a very quick highway of sharing information. So if things are not right, if companies are not doing the right thing, or are seen to be falling short of standards, that information spreads very fast, very quickly, and has an immediate impact. So I think the sense of responsibility and the environment of fluid data movement is actually putting us in a space where companies will just have to look at this more closely than they have in the past. And that is encouraging. I think in some ways scary, but on the whole, I think it's very encouraging for me.
Thank you, Punit. And Eric, final words.
Yeah, I just encourage everyone to, participate in that organic learning journey. I think, I can't remember who said that, a lot of the learning will go along as you participate, right? And as I reflect back on the last 12 to 24 months, where UOB was 24 months ago versus where we were 12 months ago versus where we are now, a lot of same players went from very little capability, but kind of knocking their heads on the wall, reading, figuring out, collaborating, now are considered market leading in terms of their capability. And that's just the nature of learning. It's never going to be handed neatly in the bento box with everything checked off. The nature of learning is a bit messy, it's a bit scary, but that's where the fun is. So I just encourage everyone to keep with that growth mindset and stay uncomfortable.
Thank you. I think to close off, I think there's a famous, there's a saying that Bill Gates said, right? He says that, to be a long-term optimist, you have to be a short-term pessimist, right? Because by being pessimistic short-term, you actually do something about it, right? And therefore, it's optimistic that with that action, people, will head in the right direction, right? Particularly with net zero. So with that, I'm turning back to Kang Chien, who wants to organize a photo taking session for everybody. So Kang Chien, back to you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much to all our speakers today. Can I invite everyone to show your appreciation for all our speakers by turning on your cameras, and we'll take a photo to commemorate today's session. I'm sure you all found this session to be very, very enlightening, informative, and also optimistic. And that this is really a very exciting time now, the window of opportunity to be a market leader. Okay, we have just a few more. Okay, so at the count of 3, we'll be taking the photo. Get ready to smile. 1, 2, 3. Thank you everyone for taking time to attend today's session. This session is recorded and we will be posting it on our YouTube channel. Do follow us there as well as our other social media channels as well. Once again, a big thank you to our speakers, Mr. Cha Teck Yew, Mr. Eric Lim, Mr. Punit Chadha, as well as Mr. Patrick Tay. If you have any questions for us, do write in to us and we will try to get our speakers to get back to you as soon as possible. Do sign up with us under our skills and support program as per you, so that you can stay informed of our upcoming events. Once again, this is BFSU and we thank you for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Bye-bye.
day ahead. Stay safe.
Thank you.